and his wife are going to be coming and sharing, so I'm going to turn that over to Tom right now.
Good morning. Not bad, not bad. So if you remember me, I didn't let people get away with a really feeble good morning. And I do need to correct one error. Sorry, Pastor Matt, but I'm from Ohio. I'm not from New York, so I'm an Ohio boy. I don't want anybody to make any mistakes there, so Buckeye fan all the way. So good morning. Thank you for being willing to tolerate us here this morning. And having us here. When our family left here to move to France after 5 years of working as assistant pastor here, move the beginning slide. We didn't quite look the way we do today. That's about what we were 23 years ago. I was a lot less. I'm still good looking. But that's the way we look now. Okay? And I'm really sorry that to tell you this, but we didn't come back to see you folks. We came back for our baby's wedding. Okay? Caleb in the middle was 9 months old. You saw in the picture, he was 9 months old when we left the chapel and headed to France. And he was married 3 weeks ago to his lovely bride, Anna, who is also a missionary kid. Her parents are missionaries in Brazil. And so we had a great time of celebration with them. Just to give you a quick rundown, our daughter Jessie at the left with our granddaughter. Our son-in-law is around. For some reason, he didn't make it into this picture. But our daughter Jessie and our son-in-law work at an MK school in Senegal, Dakar Academy. And that's our granddaughter who was born back in October. And Josh, at the other end, is an athletic trainer at Campbellsville University in Campbellsville, Kentucky. So that's just a quick family update. And because we're grandparents, we have to show the cute grandparent and grandbaby pictures. This was Elodie's first trip to Walmart. It was last week. She had never been in a grocery cart before, and she was just all excited about it. So you can tell. And that's our son-in-law, Ben, up there. He teaches Bible and English Lit and history at Dakar Academy, and my wife helps some with tutoring on the side. So as we move forward here, I have to move this little presentation by hand on my computer here because that's where my notes are. There we are. In Acts chapter 14, verses 26 and 27, the Apostle Paul modeled the way for Bev and I, and for the Vanderhoofs as well, at the end of his first missionary journey. He said, and they sailed back to Antioch, where they came from, where they had been committed to the grace of God for the work that they had completed. And arriving there, they gathered the church together, reported all that God had done through them, and how he had opened a door of faith to the Gentiles. I love how Paul puts this. He didn't come back and say, oh, it was amazing, all the things that we accomplished. You wouldn't believe the things that we did. He came back and said, it was amazing what God accomplished through us. It was amazing what God saw fit to do through us. And that's kind of where we're at, too. As of last July, I became field leader for Greater Europe Mission. That's what GEM stands for. I say GEM later on. For Greater Europe Mission in France. But for me to come here and tell you how much that I accomplished in France would be like Paul coming back and saying, wow, I've been pastoring all these churches. I've been running all these churches that we started, and I've been doing all of it. That's ridiculous. He didn't. He helped get them going, but God was doing the work. For us, we're coming back to share what God is doing through a team of over 50 missionaries in France. We have the privilege of bragging about what God's doing through our team. Speaking of our team, and I'm going to warn David here, I forgot to mention this to you. The next slide is a video, so it has audio with it. It's just music, so it's not a big deal if it. I just didn't want it to go blasting and blaring or anything like that. So I'm going to advance this.
should be a black screen, but a video that would pop up. And David's making his way to the other side. Sorry about that, I forgot to warn you. I just want to introduce our team to you. It's a short video that we put together last summer describing our team from north to south. We work in Lille, at the very top pointy part of France, all the way down into the Alps. We good? Almost? If you, it doesn't start automatically. You have to either hit the space bar or move the, oh, that's the slide afterwards. And for some reason the map didn't come up. If it doesn't work, it's not a disaster. It would be nice, but it's not a disaster. Okay, I will tell you, let me advance things here. The large percentage of the work that I do is now nationwide. You were a field leader too, right? Where you were at? So you know where I'm going to. It's like, how do you tell everybody's story? It's impossible. So our work is nationwide with the leaders of the different regions that we've divided France up into. Keep praying for us because what we're doing is a huge stretch for us. I don't know if it was for you when you jumped into that role. Yeah, yeah, it's a huge stretch for us. And Bev's role is pretty much all-encompassing as well in what she does, and she'll be coming up here to share in a second. You gotta love technology. Yeah, normally there's a map behind all those numbers up there too. Ah, okay. Neither did the picture. I hope the rest of the pictures are there. Oh, that works. Okay. Imagine that there's a map of France up there. Okay. Way up there at the number 1 is Lille. And number 2, just down below that, is the Oise, Picardy. That's where we live. That's the region where we're responsible for a good chunk of our missionaries that live there in that area. And all the way down through Paris, Angers, Lyon, and in the Alps down here in the corner where the 5, 6, 7, and 8 are. So we've got over 50 missionaries working in 4 different regions, defined regions, spread out over 9 cities. That's why I can't tell you everything about everything that's going on. It's absolutely impossible. So we're just kind of picking and choosing to share some things with you. Paul, the Apostle Paul, I'm sure he had a long time. The church in Antioch gave him a long time to share, but we don't have that many days. So we're not going to do that. I'm going to ask Bev to come up and share what her more all-encompassing role is, and then we're going to get into a couple of the more individual things that we do or that happen on our field. And grab the mic there and advance the slide with the right button, right arrow.
Good morning. They were forewarned, warmed up for me.
I'm going to get the stool over here.
All right, so Thomas shared that his national role is as field leader of our team with our 53 missionaries. I work with a smaller portion of the team, and my fancy title is Language and Culture Coach. You're probably going, what the heck does that mean? I'm going to explain what I do by telling you a couple of stories, or one story in particular, that I've entitled C'est compliqué. C'est compliqué is a French phrase that means it's complicated. And in the French mind, you would think that everything is complicated because they say this all the time. If you ask somebody to do something for you, they'll say, oh, c'est compliqué. And if you ask them if you can do something, they'll say, oh, c'est compliqué. So sometimes it really does mean it's complicated, but most of the time it just means, don't want to bother, it's just too big of a mess, too big of a hassle. They don't want to do it. So, but in this story, you'll find out that it really is complicated. going to tell you the story of Tom and Joanna Apple, maybe. We seem to be having lots of issues here today. You maybe didn't get your PowerPoint transferred, is maybe the problem. All right, I'm going to tell you their story. Anyway, had a nice picture of their family up there because they're cute. Tom and Joanna just arrived on the field about 3 months ago. They came in early April. Now, if you could have seen the picture, you would have known why, one reason why their life is complicated, because they have 5-year-old twins, Eli and Reuben, 4-year-old Silas, and 10-month-old Elodie, the second Elodie in my life, the least cute of the two because the other one's my granddaughter, so she's cuter. So Tom and Joanna and their 4 small children arrived in France. I don't know if you can imagine what that takes to fly, to move to a new country. 2 adults who were managing 4 small children, 15 checked bags, 8 carry-ons, and a stroller. So when we met them at the airport, we couldn't even see them behind the luggage cart and the mountain of bags that they were trying to push through the doors. So it was really complicated just getting there. But when they got there, they found out moving to a new country, transitioning to a new culture is just complicated. Laundry is complicated. Joanna doesn't have a dryer in the apartment where they live. And so they hang their clothes on a rack, which is great in the summer when it's sunny and breezy and, you know, breeze going through the apartment. But when it's rainy, and it's been raining for a whole week or maybe 2 weeks, that laundry, one load, is going to take 3 days to dry. And if you're doing laundry for 6 people, 4 little children included, you know that's a lot of laundry. It's like a permanent process to get laundry going. Getting around is complicated. They didn't have a vehicle for the first 3 months they lived in France, and so with 4 small children, they either walked everywhere or took public transportation. You don't even want to imagine what kind of a nightmare that is on a regular basis to do that with the little ducklings in tow. Cooking is complicated for our new arrivals. Joanna put a picture on Facebook one day. She was so proud she was making chocolate chip cookies for the boys after school. And somebody asked later, or said something like, I bet that was great. They really loved them, I'm sure. And Joanna's like, well, I didn't get the right kind of flour, and I didn't get the right kind of sugar. And so the cookies were kind of, not like, when I make them at home. So even cooking and getting used to, there we go, we got the cookies. Getting used to the new ways of doing things. It's complicated. And let me just see, do we have the rest of them or just that one? Oh, can you go back like 3 just to get their faces up there because they're, like I said, they're cute. Couple more. One more. Oh, no, one more. Sorry, I lied. There's the apples. So that's who we're talking about. Does this not function? Is that? Okay, that's fine. All right, so that's the apple family that we're talking about. So not only all these normal things, but they all got sick. So remember, there's 6 of them. They all got sick, every single one of them, multiple times. Between allergies and flus and colds and fevers, they have run the gamut round and round and round and round. In fact, one weekend, they went to travel to the city where they hope to be working in the future to do some prayer walking and some other things. Mom got sick, baby got sick, and one of the boys got sick that weekend while they were there in a town away from home. And they actually ended up having to take their boy to the ER the morning that they were hoping to be traveling back that day. So they went to the ER, got him some treatment, raced to the train station, got on their train, went home. Later that night, another of the boys got really sick, and they ended up taking him in the middle of the night to the ER. And so we're like, you guys are really good, like 2 ERs in 2 cities with 2 kids in the space of 24 hours. Not everyone can do that. And remember, they're doing it with a very minimal language proficiency level because they just got there. So you can go ahead to wherever we were, with the one with the baby. The last one to get sick, as far as I know, was the baby, and she had 103 fever. You can keep going. Keep going. And she had 103 fever the same week right here that the temperatures in France reached the highest recorded level in 50 years. And there's no AC, and so especially our new arrivals, were just like, oh my gosh, what's with this country? What's going on here? So you can go ahead one. You can see that life for new arrivals is complicated. Well, it got worse for the Apple family. They couldn't open a bank account. long story, but new tax laws in the U.S. since January have made some changes that the French banks now no longer want to open accounts for Americans. And so for 2 months they tried and just didn't work. Finally they were able to go to another bank and submit piles and piles of paperwork and finally got a bank account. But without a bank account in France, you can't do much. You can't get internet, for example, at your home. So all these beginning weeks, you know, they want to be like connecting with their friends and family back home. No internet at home because they don't have a bank account, because it's complicated. They couldn't get a car. I told you they were without a car for 3 months. Well, that was because they didn't have a bank account and they couldn't transfer enough money to buy a car until they had a bank account. So the first 3 months for the Apple family have just been, they're very excited to begin their missionary career in France after raising support and, you know, oh, wow, we're on the field, it's great. But it's complicated. I wish I could tell you that that's an isolated story, but a lot of our new people go through stuff like this. Another new couple who just arrived in April tried for 2.5 months before they succeeded in getting their middle school son in school. So mom and dad are going to language school, little sister's going to elementary school, and middle school son is just twiddling his thumbs at home because he can't go to school for 2.5 months. So that was complicated. Another one of our single gals who arrived in December has had 5 people back in Canada die in her close circle of friends and family. So that's complicated when you're trying to transition to a new life, to have so much happening emotionally. She said it's really weird to attend a funeral by Skype, but that's what happened to her. Health issues. We have 2 older couples who are trying to learn language, and so I don't know if any of you who are over 50 or over 60, we have a couple over 60 who's in language study. C'est compliqué for those couples. So our new arrivals go through a lot. And my job as a language and culture coach, I think you can go on one, I can't remember what's next, there we go. I help them transition from the US to France. I help them with getting a visa, with filling all their paperwork out properly in the country once they get there. I walk with them through these initial months, the bumps and the humps and the roller coaster ride of just transitioning to a new life. I oversee their learning, their language learning, their culture acquisition. I don't do the teaching, I don't teach them French, but I'm the one in contact with the school, the teachers. I'm the one writing to them saying, don't forget to send me your grades, and checking up on their monthly reports and stuff like that. But my favorite one is the last one, and this is why I love this job that I'm doing now. I get to see them at the end of their language time get through all those bumps, get through all those humps to a place where they're thriving, not just surviving. They survive the first few weeks and the first few months. But I love to see them get through that to the place where they're thriving in their new home, where they're integrating into their new team, where they're speaking French more or less well, and they have become long-term effective missionaries with our team. And that's really exciting. So that's my administrative piece of what I do in France. I love it. It's not always fun, the humps and the bumps, but I love getting them to that other side where they come out and they're excited about doing what God has called them there to do.
Okay, I got to take my glasses off so I don't have anything else to read. So, okay, let's go on to the next one.
You're in trouble now, he's winging it.
That's it. Okay.
We might be out by 1.
There we go. All right, now, when we show up in an area, a specific town or whatever, as missionaries in France, we show up as what we would call here in the States religious minorities. Think of, let's say, if somebody moves into your neighborhood who belongs to a religion that's 1% of the population, that's a religious minority. And if they come in and they say, "Hi, I want to start one of my churches here," first thing everybody thinks is like, "Whoa, back off! This is weird. This is strange," you know. But that's kind of the reality we deal with because evangelical Christianity is only 1% of the population in France. So we come in as the weird outsiders, and on top of that, we're Americans, so that adds to it. So we need to come in with a plan of how can we get to know people, connect with people, and build their trust so they realize that we're not aliens with 3 heads, but we're real people, and we've got a faith that's changed our lives. I'm going to start with one story in Lyon. city of Lyon is about 2 hours south, 2.5 hours by train south of Paris. And we have a couple down there. It's an American couple, Gem missionaries, that are partnering with one French couple. And they built a team around them, and they said, okay, how can we creatively, out of the box, start a church down here? And so what they did was they rented what used to be an Indian restaurant. And it's kind of hard to see on that picture, but in the background, those are stone walls. This is old Lyon, the old part of Lyon. So we're talking hundreds and hundreds of years old, these buildings. And they created what's called a co-working space. I don't know if you've ever heard of a co-working space before. They're fairly popular here in the States now, too. If you want to start a business, but you don't want to rent an office, a secretary, and I mean the whole kit and caboodle, you don't want to start out by renting all that and spending all that money. You go to a co-working space and rent a spot or rent a desk. You're renting the mailbox, so you can get your mail for your business in this location. And it's got an internet connection, so you can basically start your business right there. And so they opened a co-working space. The desks on the side are rented by the month, and the ones in the middle you can rent those by the day or by the week. You just bring your computer with you every day or whatever. And so that's how they fund the initial starting of their church plant, because on Sundays they take down those tables and they have their church services right there in that location. And what's interesting is they have their church service at 5 o'clock in the evening on Sundays. And you think, okay, well, it's their space. Why don't they do it on Sunday mornings, like everybody else does? But Lyon is it's the gastronomic capital of the world, really, but of France. You can eat good in Lyon. So Saturday nights, people are out partying, they're out eating out, they're out late. So Sunday mornings, they're all sleeping off what they did the night before. So if you want to reach non-believers in Lyon, you don't have a Sunday morning church service because they're never going to come. They're not going to be there. They're going to be sleeping. So they have their church service at 5 o'clock on Sunday afternoons. They call it happy hour. They invite people to come. Now, if you look at that situation where they're sitting around, there are people in the church that also rent some of these desks during the week. All week long, they're rubbing shoulders with non-believers, having conversations with these people. Let's go get a cup of coffee. I'm tired of working in front of my screen. And it's organic. They can start those spiritual conversations naturally with people. Let's go ahead and hit the next slide. Back in the right-hand corner, you'll see the red couch there. There are these two couches here every day at 7 in the morning and 6 in the evening. It's in the contract, these people, when they rent these places, that there's going to be a prayer meeting there every day, 7 in the morning, 6 in the evening. At 7 in the morning, they tell people, okay, let's pray and let's ask God for the eyes to see what he's going to do today. And at 6 in the evening, people come back and say, okay, where did you see God working today? And so unbelievers are still working at their desk, but they're hearing what's going on. They're hearing that God isn't irrelevant, but God is someone who's active in people's lives. And just to make a long story short, we were at a picnic for all of our missionaries a few days before we left to come back to the States. The missionary couple who's working with this, they were over at the side when we were having our sharing time or whatever, and they were looking at texts. I was a little annoyed with them for looking at their texts in the middle of our meeting, but it was for a good reason, because they were all excited. And when it finally got around to them to share, they said they'd just gotten a text that the third person that week had accepted Christ. I mean, they're putting a church in the middle of the world, if you want to look at it that way. And it's exciting to see the Christians and the non-Christians rubbing shoulders and learning from each other and growing, and the church is growing. God is building his church in a very unique way. Lyon. I'm going to let Bev come and share another way that things are happening.
So as we're trying to figure out how do we as foreigners, part of a minority religious group, how do we connect in our communities? Tom has explained one way that some of our colleagues are doing that. Another way that we do that is through music. Now that's probably not going to surprise you guys who know us from years back. You can go ahead to the next slide. In May, in our town where we live, we're part of a church plant that Tom's going to tell you a little bit more about in just a minute. But we're just involved there because we live there. It's not part of our leadership role. We're just Christians who live in that town involved in a new church that's getting started. And so we contribute the gifts that we have to that. And so I've had the idea for a long time to do a gospel piano concert. And if you put the word gospel on anything in France, people flock to it because they love gospel music. Now, the cool thing is they don't really know what gospel music is. They just know that it has a beat and it's really fun music, and so they go to it. So it's fun because it gives you a large latitude. If you're planning a concert, you can put anything in there almost and call it gospel as long as it's got a little beat to it. So I put together some music, piano arrangements. The other weird thing is that gospel music in France is almost always sung. And so I'd go around, you know, announcing concert or asking merchants in our town to put up posters, and they were like, "Oh, cool, you singing?" No, I'm not singing, I'm playing the piano." "Oh, cool, who's singing?" No one's singing, it's a piano concert. That's why there's that thing across the middle of the poster that looks like a piano keyboard, because it's a piano concert. Anyway, so that was kind of fun because it was just an unusual way to present gospel music. But we actually kind of taught them. We talked about the slaves. Why did the slaves sing? Where did this music come from? What is gospel music? What does it mean? And it was really fun because it's a great way to share Christ, the story of salvation. The slaves sang because they're people of faith and they're transmitting their faith. They're singing Bible stories. They're singing biblical concepts. And we had a person who shared a testimony about coming to faith. We wanted to tie the slave stories to stories of people today. And these themes that we're talking about are real for us today, just like they were for the slaves. So we talked about the theme of faith. We talked about suffering. The slaves sang about their suffering, and they had a lot of it. And so we shared some music with, that talked about suffering. We projected the words translated into French so that even with the piano music, they didn't lose the meaning of the songs. And then we had somebody who gave a testimony about how her faith has sustained her in suffering. And the third theme that we presented to them was the theme of hope. The slaves sang about their future hope. They sang a lot about heaven. A lot of the Negro spirituals and early gospel songs are about heaven. And so I played some songs about heaven. We had somebody who testified about how her life before Christ was so hopeless that she wanted to end her life. And when she came to Jesus, she had hope for now and for the future. So the people that came to this concert heard a lot of stories about how the gospel is active and relevant in their lives. We had a lot of good connections. We were in a room that was approved for 80 people. We set up 76 chairs, not because we had 4 minus faith, but because that was how the rows worked out. And as the time for the concert came, people are coming in, and our team was like, "Oh, we're going to need more chairs. Run and get more chairs and get people seated." And I'm like, "Okay, I'm going to start." "Oh, no, there's more people coming in." "Well, let's go get more chairs." In the end of the night, we had almost 100 people crammed into the room for 80. Hopefully the fire department didn't count. But it turned out really great. We had a lot of great conversations with people through sharing music, sharing our faith through music. Another way that we've done that recently, and go ahead to the next slide, almost everywhere we've lived in France for the past 20 some odd years, Tom and I have been part of a local community choir. And it's just a great way to get to know people. It's a great way to do life with people in the community, get to know them. This past year, we had the privilege of singing with our choir the Mozart Requiem, which is a beautiful, beautiful piece of music. Funeral mass, so it doesn't sound like it's great, but it is beautiful. And the really cool thing is the text, which we sang in Latin, comes largely from Scripture. We're working with a French translation so that people know what they're singing about. So we have the opportunity to have some really interesting conversations with people. We're singing about salvas gratis, free salvation. And they're like, "Oh, that's a weird concept, And so we engage them in that. We talk about, why is that weird for you to have free salvation? And it's been really fun for us to have those opportunities through. Now, we don't always get that. Sometimes we're just singing Christmas music in Polish and German and Latin and who knows, English. Sometimes that's really fun. The holly and the ivy. It's fun to see 50 French people trying to sing in English. But anyway, we don't always get the opportunities to have such open spiritual conversations, but this year has been really fun for that. We've been building relationships, and now we have the content there through the music that we're singing to just be able to open up some spiritual conversations. So it's really been fun. You can do the next one. This is a concert we did in Paris, and this is the concert that we did in our town. We sang with another chorale, so about half of those are our people and half from the other chorale. I don't know if you can find us in there. Tom's reflecting the light up in the top right corner, and I'm somewhere more towards the middle. Anyway, we did the concert 3 times, spent a lot of great time with people on buses, traveling, practices, whatever. So this is just because we like music. It's part of who God made us to be, and it's part of how we personally connect in our neighborhoods and do life with people to reach out with them and share Christ.
Okay. The next one, bringing the party to Clermont. I'm definitely going to be I'm doing this on the fly. As Bev mentioned, we have our national roles, but we also are believers. We have the roles of being salt and light in our community. And, okay, next slide. We are there helping the church planting couple, JP and Stephanie Gaylord. JP and Stephanie arrived in Clermont just a few months after we did, straight from language school. We, as a couple, can't plant a church in Clermont because of our role. It's a full-time job. But we told Stephanie and JP, listen, we're on your team. We want to encourage you. Just consider us like super active members. We want to be there for you. And so JP's then spearheading the ministry. And as that 1% person coming in, he's been running into a lot of brick walls, going to town hall. That's one of the things you usually do is go to town hall and have a meeting with the mayor to say, I'm in town. I don't want to do anything behind anybody's back. We're looking at starting an evangelical church here in Clermont. And he's been trying for 3 years and hasn't been able to get an appointment with the mayor. It's just, he just keeps getting blown off. So he started investigating himself. Where are there needs that we can meet to build trust in this community? And one of the huge areas is the low-income housing area on the west side of town. Very much an immigrant area, North African, some of them refugees. And the town really doesn't want to deal with these people. It's them. We're us over here, the middle class and upper class. And whenever something nice happens in town, it's always in that side of town. But nobody ever does anything for the poor side of town. So JP started looking into the possibilities, found out from some sources in town that, hey, if you want to do something over there, great. We'll give you materials and things like that. So what we did, next slide. Oh, I forgot. This is the one church, up until last September, it was the only church in Clermont. That's St. Samson Catholic Church. Foundations were laid in the year 1220. There has not been another church since then, as far as we know. Next slide. Until last September, when we started La Source, the Source, the church plant that we're doing, we're meeting in the Zumba room of a weightlifting gym. On the back wall over there, when we got there, we're setting stuff up, and there were all the posters of the guys, in their Speedos, greased up and everything, and JP's going, I can't preach in front of that, so we roll those up, before the services. But, and so we said, okay, we're looking with our group of about 20 to 30 people that come to our church plant, which is also, in France, pretty good for the first few months. These are believers, some of them new believers, some of them older believers that are excited that there's a church in their town finally, and say, we need to reach these people. What can we do? So we decided to throw them a party. Next slide. Yes. Festival. And when we say festival, community festival, it's an opportunity for the church to offer something to the community. Say, coming in and saying, no strings attached, we want to have fun and we want you to be part of it. So on May 7th, next slide, we gathered together on a field right at the foot of the apartment buildings where these low-income people live with these tents. Okay, next slide. Got them all set up, all ready to go. People from our church were showing up to get stands ready. They didn't even really have an idea of what we were trying to accomplish. We were trying to give them the idea of what we were trying to do, and they kind of followed along with us. Okay, we're still not sure about this, but as we got things going, just go ahead and hit the next 4 slides, I think. Okay, we had a bouncy castle there, and next one, face painting. Stephanie was our bubble expert. This guy, he depressed the heck out of me because I was supposed to be the one doing balloon sculptures, and I was doing like swords and stupid little things. And he asked if he could help, and he makes Snoopy on a motorcycle. And I thought, okay, I'm totally demoralized. I can't do this. But we started doing all this stuff, and slowly but surely people started coming out. Now, I didn't mention, by the way, it was pouring rain that day. And so I can imagine people on their balconies in their apartments looking out going, what are these crazy people doing? I mean, it's raining, and we're setting up tents, we're setting up stuff. But they saw we started having fun. So little by little, people started coming out. And while these kinds of things around the U-shaped area that we had set up draw people in, it's the games that take place in the middle that are really important. So go to the next slide. Here we got about 50 people doing a tug of war. Okay, the whole festival thing, the concept is community, bringing people together and giving them a reason to be together. And so you start out with the limbo, which is really pretty individualistic, you know, but then you move into things like tug of war. We did the water balloon volleyball with the sheets, and where everybody's working together. And by the end, and this you'll love, you've never lived until you've seen 50 French people do the hokey pokey in English. Okay, but we'd have never been able to get them to do that at the beginning. But by 2 hours later, when we're about ready to finish up, everybody's just having a blast. Okay, go to the next slide. So this is me at the end. We did this 2 days in a row, by the way, and it rained both days. But at the end of those 2 days, we had a little rehash. We all stood around talking in the rain. So how did it go? And we heard people say, we heard 3 questions all day long, all weekend long. First one was, who are you? And we said, we're the Evangelical Protestant Church of Clermont. And we meet in this room. This is who we are. And why are you doing this? We're doing this because God's blessed the heck out of us. And we want to be able to share that with you. And with no strings attached. And the third question was, when are you coming back? Because nobody ever does this for us. And for me, I mean, that was just a win-win-win situation all the way around. And on top, another bonus, the assistant to the mayor for that part of town showed up on the second day, saw what we were doing, went to the pastor and went to JP and said, hey, if you need anything in the future, come to me. I'll make sure it happens. So God's opening doors. All we did, we showed love. We had fun. When we were training people to do this, we didn't call it evangelism training. We called it fun training. Because you can have fun with people and get into a spiritual conversation quicker than you believe. It's amazing how that can happen. If you try to force something, no, it's really hard. And that's what we were getting through people's heads, is that, yeah, this is something that we all can do. We can all be a part of.
All right. So there you have some stories. Go ahead to the next slide. I don't actually remember what's next. Oh, thank you. I was hoping that was what was next. So we're here to tell you what God is doing in France. God is at work. God is on the move. Yeah, if we were here going to tell you more stories, we'd stay all week, but that's not possible for you or for us. I got to go home and kiss that grandbaby because I miss her. Anyway, God is on the move, and that's the important thing. God is on the move in France. It's amazing when we look back to 23 years ago when we first arrived, how different the climate, the spiritual climate is in France today from what it was 23 years ago. There's an openness, especially among the young people. They're searching. And so we need to be there to provide the truth for those spaces that are opening up. So it's an exciting time to be working and ministering in France. Oh, my thank you went away. But we want to also say thank you because it's what God is doing through us. It's what God is doing through us, not just through us. You guys are a part of that because you support us, some of you individually, and as a church, you're part of our support base. And we could not be in France doing what we're doing without that. And so that is tremendously important to us. Pastor said something along the lines of, I don't think the missionaries wake up and wonder, who's giving today. Depends on the week or the month. But generally, no, because we have confidence in the team that God has provided for us. And it's great to not have to wake up and worry about that, but to just be able to plunge into what God has called us to do. So thank you, because you guys are a part of what's happening in France. We also want to say, along with the thank you, every missionary, I think, it finds themselves in this position from time to time of having to fight fiscal gravity. What goes up, when you're in the States and raising support, inevitably comes back down. And that's normal. It happens to all missionaries, People get laid off, or people's economic situation changes and they have to stop giving or stop supporting. And in addition, with our new leadership responsibilities, our expenses are creeping up. We're being asked to travel more in France to visit our teams, and in Europe to have trainings, to go to leadership meetings and things like that. So we are needing to boost our support base a little bit. If you're interested in that, we're not at the point of eating rice and beans yet, so we're not groveling and saying we can't go back until we raise more money. So that's good. God has been good, and He's provided. But it would help us to build our support base. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, we have information out on the table in the foyer, giving cards, envelopes. There's also a brochure about Greater Europe Mission if you want to know a little bit more about the mission that we're working with. And there's prayer cards. Now, I'm kind of thinking you guys should all have at least 3 of those on your fridge by now. But if you don't, there's more out there. They're a little bit old. They might be like 5 or 6 years old, but we look better, so we just keep those. We're just going to keep those forever young, younger. Anyway, it's really been great to be here, see familiar faces. They look a little different than they did last time we saw them, some of you. But it's great to be able to be here, share what God is doing. Thank you. We sort of invited ourselves, so thank you, Pastor, for allowing that to happen. But we didn't want to pass through the area without being able to stop and see you guys. So it's great to be with you. And maybe Pastor, not sure who's next, but we'll turn it back over to you.
That you're always welcome to come back anytime you are passing through this area. So, it's interesting. Whenever a missionary comes through, I'm always excited because that's actually where I thought we were going initially. My wife and I, we felt called to go to the mission field, and we were thinking this is where God was having us, and God made me a pastor of a small country church. And He shaped me through that time, and He just reorientated my focus. And we're all on the same team. We're just doing different things. It's like if you're playing basketball, everyone's not a center because they got short guys too. And then some of us are just like on the bench, just cheering, because we're really not very good in that role. But we have another role. I say this, and hopefully you guys have been encouraged by hearing of what's taking place. I always sit there, and then the Lord just seems to bring verses to my mind as I'm listening. And a verse that came to my mind at this particular time was in the book of Acts, Acts 15. It says, "And all the people kept silent, and they were listening to Barnabas and Paul, and they were relating the signs and wonders God had done through them among the Gentiles." Now, that's exactly what we were doing, just not listening to what Paul and Silas or Barnabas was doing. We were listening to what God was doing through them to reach a people that God placed in their hearts. We rejoice that God's put them there. And now in a different capacity, now as older missionaries, just like Jim and Alice, their focus had to change. Much like what we do here, sometimes our focus changes. Maybe we did something when we were younger, but you know what? God is doing things around the world. Don't lose sight of that in the midst of your busyness. Open your eyes to see what God is doing. Listen to those stories, and may they be an encouragement so that you and our lives in the valley will look out and see what God is doing. I'm going to tell you, God's doing some amazing things in the valley. It's awesome to be in God's team. And like one preacher said, we're on the winning team. I mean, we're not going to lose. which is pretty awesome when you start to think about it. But I pray that your hearts were encouraged. For the sake of time, we're not going to go ahead and sing. But I will go ahead and ask Tom and Bev to go by the back door. You can go ahead and shake hands with them on the way out. We do have a cookout in the pavilion as well. Everyone's welcome to attend. And if you did not get one of their prayer cards, or if you want to know more about their ministry or want to support them, just go ahead and talk to them or grab one of their brochures, and I'm sure that you will be a blessing to them as well. So let's go ahead, and we're going to close right now and ask the Lord to go before us. So, Father, I don't know, but it just energizes my heart, and I'm sure others here, as we hear what you're doing around the world. The struggles that missionaries go through, Lord, are sometimes foreign to us, but we forget that they're people just like us. Their young couple, Lord, are facing difficulties, learning a language, learning culture. I mean, even opening a bank account. So we pray right now for that couple that you would just minister to them, strengthen them, and I pray that they would not grow discouraged or weary in well-doing. I pray, too, that our eyes will be open to what you're doing in our midst here in the valley, Lord. You're doing things around the world, in Africa and China and Asia. Lord, we've got a very narrow focus, but I pray that even today our hearts would grow bigger from just what we heard, and may you encourage both Tom and Bev and Jim and Ellis as they've come and joined us as well. So would you bless the time, bless the food as well as we're about to eat, and may you enjoy the fellowship, Lord, as you've heard us talk about you, and may you be honored and glorified. In Jesus' name, I pray for these things. Amen. And you're dismissed.